Salahuddin Ayyubi, known in the West as Saladin, was born in 1137 in the town of Tikrit, situated along the Tigris River in present-day Iraq. His birth took place in a period of great turbulence, as the Muslim world was fragmented into various dynasties and principalities. While the Crusaders had established their states in the Levant after the First Crusade, the political landscape was one of rivalry, instability, and constant conflict. But it was within this environment that Salahuddin's character and vision would be shaped. His father, Salahuddin Ayyubi, was a respected governor and military commander, and his family belonged to a Kurdish lineage that valued loyalty, discipline, and service. The night Salahuddin was born, his father and uncle were forced to leave Tikrit due to political disputes. And yet this moment marked the beginning of a life destined for greatness. Growing up, Salahuddin was not initially drawn to warfare as many might imagine. Accounts from historians suggest that, as a boy, he was more interested in learning religious studies and the culture of the Islamic world. He studied the Quran, the traditions of the Prophet, the works of scholars who emphasized justice and leadership guided by faith. However, because he came from a military family, he was also trained in horsemanship, archery, and the skills of command. These two aspects of his upbringing, the pursuit of knowledge and the training for battle, combined to create a unique leader who would one day be admired not just for his conquests, but also for his principles. His early career began under the shadow of his uncle, Salahuddin Ayyubi, a prominent general in the service of the Zenja dynasty of Syria. Ayyubi was a seasoned commander with ambitions in Egypt, and he brought Salahuddin along on several campaigns. It was during these years that Salahuddin first experienced the realities of military life, learning not only about battlefield tactics, but also about the complexities of politics. Egypt at the time was a rich but unstable land, ruled by the Fatimid Caliphate, which was weakening under internal strife and external threats. Ayyubi's campaigns, although filled with hardships, gave Salahuddin the opportunity to observe leadership up close and to develop his own qualities of patience, discretion, and strategic thinking. Despite his uncle's strong personality, Salahuddin gradually emerged as a figure of influence. Unlike many leaders of the time, he was not driven by personal ambition or the desire for wealth. His humility and devotion to Islam set him apart. When Ayyubi died in 1169, Salahuddin was unexpectedly appointed as the vizier of Egypt by the Fatimid Caliph, and he doubted his ability to rule, considering him young and relatively untested. But Salahuddin quickly proved his worth. He reorganized the administration, strengthened the military, and restored order in a land that had been weakened by years of conflict. 1170. He abolished the declining Fatimid Caliphate and declared allegiance to the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, a move that not only solidified his authority, but also realigned Egypt with the broader Sunni Muslim world. This decision demonstrated his vision, as he was not only thinking of Egypt's immediate stability, but also of the greater unity of the Muslim lands. Salahuddin's leadership was marked by justice, as he treated both his allies and his subjects with fairness. His reputation began to grow beyond Egypt, and many started to see him as a leader capable of defending the Muslim world against the advancing Crusaders. Salahuddin's early life and rise to power show a man who combined knowledge, faith, and skill in a way that was rare among rulers of his time. From his modest beginnings in Tikrit to becoming the master of Egypt, he demonstrated that leadership was not about personal gain, but about responsibility, service, and the pursuit of a higher cause. His journey in these formative years prepared him for the challenges that lay ahead. Challenges that would ultimately lead him to become one of the most respected figures in both Islamic and world history. The period in which Salahuddin Ayyubi rose to prominence was marked by fragmentation within the Muslim world. While the Crusaders controlled Jerusalem and several strongholds along the Levantan coast, Muslim rulers themselves were deeply divided, often more concerned with their personal rivalries than with resisting the foreign invaders. The once mighty Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad held symbolic authority, but its actual influence had weakened, leaving regional rulers to pursue their own ambitions. Syria was ruled by competing dynasties. Egypt had only recently come under control, and in many parts of the Islamic world, The spirit of unity that once defined the era of the early caliphs had long faded. Salahuddin recognized that without unification, the Muslims could not hope to reclaim their lands or resist the Crusaders effectively. This vision of unity became the central mission of his leadership. As the new ruler of Egypt, Salahuddin began the long and difficult task of consolidating power. Egypt was not only a rich and fertile land, but also strategically vital for any serious campaign against the Crusaders. Salahuddin worked tirelessly to strengthen its defenses, reform its institutions, and win the loyalty of its people. However, he also understood that Egypt alone could not carry the weight of such a monumental struggle. For a genuine resistance, he needed to bring Syria and other Muslim territories under a common banner. This meant he would have to navigate not just military challenges, but also the complex world of diplomacy, alliances, and at times, confrontation with fellow Muslim leaders. One of Salahuddin's greatest qualities was his patience. He did not attempt to force unity through reckless aggression, but instead employed a combination of diplomacy, respect, and calculated military campaigns. He was careful in his dealings with Nur al-Din Zengi, the ruler of Syria, who had been both a mentor and a rival figure. Salahuddin served under him during his earlier years, and though tensions arose, Salahuddin remained committed to the larger goal of solidarity against the Crusaders. After Nur al-Din's death in 1174, Syria entered a period of instability, and Salahuddin seized the opportunity to extend his influence. Through a series of campaigns and alliances, he gradually brought Damascus, Aleppo, and other crucial regions under his control. What made Salahuddin's efforts remarkable was his ability to inspire trust even among those who initially viewed him with suspicion. Many local rulers feared losing their independence to his growing power. But Salahuddin's reputation for justice, mercy, and fairness helped to win them over. He often spared defeated rivals, offered them honorable terms, and avoided unnecessary bloodshed. These acts distinguished him from many of the rulers of his time, who were quick to resort to cruelty and betrayal. By showing clemency, Salahuddin not only expanded his territory, but also gained the loyalty of populations, who came to see him as a leader, driven by faith rather than by greed. The unification of Egypt and Syria under Salahuddin's leadership was not merely a political achievement, it was also a psychological and spiritual one. For decades, the Muslim world had been disheartened by internal conflicts and external defeats. Salahuddin's success in bridging divides rekindled hope that Jerusalem and other holy places could be liberated. His cause resonated not only with rulers, but also with ordinary people who began to rally behind him. Scholars, poets, and preachers of the time often spoke of Salahuddin as a leader chosen by God to restore dignity to the Muslim world by the mid-1180s. Salahuddin had transformed himself from a regional ruler into the leader of a vast and unified front. Egypt, Syria, and large parts of Mesopotamia were now under his command. With this unity achieved, he could finally direct his attention toward the Crusader states that had long plagued the region. This process of unification was not easy, requiring years of struggle, negotiation, and perseverance, but it laid the foundation for the victories that would follow. It was only through this unity that Salahuddin was able to stand at the head of an army strong enough to challenge the Crusaders and ultimately change the course of history in the Holy Land. By the late 1180s, Salahuddin Ayyubi had achieved what many had thought impossible. He had unified much of the Muslim world under his leadership and prepared a powerful front against the Crusader states. For nearly a century, the Crusaders had controlled Jerusalem and established their strongholds across the Levant, using these fortresses as bases for constant raids and expansion. The Muslim population had suffered greatly under their occupation, and tensions were reaching a breaking point. Salahuddin, having consolidated Egypt, Syria, and other territories, recognized that the time had come to confront the Crusaders directly. His moment arrived in 1187 at the Battle of Hattin, a confrontation that would alter the balance of power in the Holy Land. The immediate cause of this decisive battle stemmed from the reckless actions of a Crusader leader, Reynold of Chatillon. Known for his cruelty and arrogance, Reynold violated treaties by attacking Muslim caravans, even threatening to march on the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. His behavior enraged Salahuddin, who had long tolerated the provocations of the Crusaders, while preparing his forces for a larger campaign. Reynold's actions provided Salahuddin with both the justification and the rallying cry to launch a full-scale offensive against the Crusader states. Gathering a vast army, Salahuddin prepared to deliver a blow that would weaken the Crusaders beyond repair. The Crusaders, some Stono King Guy of Jerusalem, assembled their forces in response, determined to protect their strongholds and maintain control of the region. Confident in their heavily armed knights, they believed they could withstand any Muslim assault. However, Salahuddin was not only a warrior, but also a master strategist. He carefully studied the terrain and conditions, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He knew that the summer heat of Palestine could become a weapon in itself, and he planned to use it against the Crusader army in July 1187. The Crusaders marched toward Tiberias, where the Muslim forces had launched attacks. Salahuddin deliberately lured them into the arid plains near the Horns of Hattin, a volcanic formation rising above the dry landscape. The Crusader army, weighed down by heavy armor, found itself trapped in the searing heat with little access to water. Salahuddin's forces controlled the wells and sources of water in the area, cutting the Crusaders off from relief. As the days passed, thirst, exhaustion, and the blazing sun broke their morale. While Salahuddin's troops, well supplied and disciplined, closed in on their weakening enemies. When the battle began, Salahuddin's army surrounded the Crusaders, using waves of archers and cavalry to harass and exhaust them further. The Crusaders attempted to break through, but found themselves overwhelmed on all sides. The heat and smoke from fires lit by Salahuddin's men added to the chaos, blinding and suffocating the Crusaders as they struggled to fight. One by one, their ranks collapsed under the relentless pressure. The once mighty army of Jerusalem, considered invincible in its heavy armor and disciplined formations, was shattered. The outcome was nothing short of catastrophic for the Crusaders. Thousands were killed or captured, and their power in the Holy Land was irreparably damaged. Guy of Jerusalem himself was taken prisoner, along with Reynold of Chatillon. Salahuddin personally confronted Reynold, reminding him of his treachery and attacks on Muslim caravans. True to his principles, Salahuddin spared King Guy but executed Reynold, seeing him as beyond forgiveness for his repeated acts of cruelty and broken oaths. This act sent a clear message. Salahuddin was merciful to those who honored peace, but uncompromising toward those who defied justice. The Battle of Hattin was more than just a military victory. It was a turning point in history. It destroyed the Crusader armies, strengthened the region, and left their cities and fortresses vulnerable. For the first time in decades, the balance of power shifted decisively in favor of the Muslims. The victory at Hattin not only paved the way for the liberation of Jerusalem later that year, but also elevated Salahuddin's reputation as one of the greatest commanders of his age. His careful planning, patience, and understanding of both strategy and psychology had brought about a triumph that would be remembered for centuries as a symbol of determination, faith, and the power of unity. After the crushing defeat of the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin in July 1187, Salahuddin Ayyubi stood at the threshold of achieving the dream that had guided much of his life, the liberation of Jerusalem. For nearly 9 decades, the holy city had remained under Crusader control, its people subjected to harsh rule and its sacred sites desecrated. The massacre, carried out by the Crusaders in 1099, when they first seized Jerusalem, still echoed in the memory of Muslims who longed for justice and the restoration of their holy places. With the Crusader army shattered at Hattin and their leaders taken captive, the road to Jerusalem lay open before Salahuddin. But he approached this monumental task with the same patience, strategy, and sense of justice that had defined his rise. Marching from victory, Salahuddin systematically captured key Crusader strongholds in the region. Cities such as Acre, Nablus, Jaffa, and Ashkelon fell one after another. Leaving the Crusaders with little ability to mount a serious defense, his forces pressed on, and by September 1187, Salahuddin's army had encircled Jerusalem. Unlike many conquerors who would have rushed to take the city by force, Salahuddin weighed his options carefully. He was determined to reclaim Jerusalem, but he also understood the symbolic significance of how the conquest would be carried out. The city was not only the heart of the Muslim world's struggle, but also a sacred place for Christians and Jews. A reckless assault that ended in bloodshed would dishonor the sanctity of what he sought to restore. Inside Jerusalem, the Crusader defenders, led by Balian of Ibelin, prepared for a desperate last stand. Outnumbered and weakened, they knew they could not hold the city indefinitely, but they feared the fate that awaited them if the walls were breached. Memories of the 1099 massacre, when tens of thousands of Muslims and Jews had been slaughtered after the Crusader conquest, haunted the population. Women and children crowded the streets, terrified of what might come. Balian himself sought terms with Salahuddin, knowing that continued resistance would bring only destruction. Salahuddin, guided by his principles of mercy and justice, agreed to negotiate. The terms he offered were unprecedented in an age known for brutality. Christians who wished to leave the city were allowed to do so freely, provided they paid a modest ransom for safe passage. Those who could not afford the ransom were not abandoned. Salahuddin and his commanders personally contributed money to secure the release of many poor families. But unlike the Crusaders, who had turned Jerusalem into a river of blood when they seized, its Salahuddin forbade killing, looting, or desecration. His soldiers were commanded to respect the lives and dignity of the inhabitants. For Jews, who had been expelled by the Crusaders decades earlier, Salahuddin opened the gates and invited them to return, restoring Jerusalem as a city of diverse faiths once again. The moment Salahuddin entered Jerusalem in October 1187 was one of profound significance. He went straight to Al-Aqsa Mosque, which had been turned into a church under Crusader rule, and ordered it purified and restored as a house of Muslim worship. The Dome of the Rock, too, was cleansed and returned to its original sanctity. The liberation was not celebrated with vengeance, but with reverence, gratitude, and humility. His actions astonished not only Muslims, but also many Christians in Europe, where news of Salahuddin's mercy spread quickly. Even those who considered him their enemy admired his chivalry and restraint, qualities that stood in stark contrast to the cruelty of many rulers of the time. The liberation of Jerusalem solidified Salahuddin's legacy as more than just a conqueror. It revealed his vision of leadership grounded in faith, justice, and humanity. To his people, he was the long-awaited hero who had restored honor and dignity to the Muslim world. To his enemies, he became a figure of respect, embodying the ideals of honor even in war. By choosing mercy over revenge, Salahuddin set an example that transcended the battlefield and entered the realm of moral greatness, ensuring that the liberation of Jerusalem would be remembered not only as a military triumph, but as a moment of profound humanity. When Salahuddin Ayyubi passed away in March 1193 in Damascus, the world lost not just a formidable commander, but also a leader whose life embodied the values of justice, humility, and faith. At the height of his power, Salahuddin ruled over Egypt, Syria, and large parts of Mesopotamia, yet his personal wealth was almost non-existent. Chroniclers of the time recorded that when he died, he left behind only a few dinars and no property of significance. He had given away much of his wealth to the poor and to the cause of defending the Muslim world. This selflessness highlighted one of the defining features of his legacy, that true leadership was not about personal enrichment, but about service to the people and dedication to a higher purpose. Salahuddin's reputation extended far beyond the Muslim world. Even his Christian adversaries, who had spent years battling him, came to admire him deeply. Accounts from European chroniclers and knights described him as a man of unparalleled honor and chivalry. Richard the Lionheart, his greatest opponent during the Third Crusade, famously respected Salahuddin for his generosity and fairness. In one instance, when Richard fell ill during the campaign, Salahuddin sent him fruits and medicine, gestures unheard of in the brutal climate of medieval warfare. Such actions earned Salahuddin respect, even in the courts of Europe, where he was often praised as the model of a noble enemy. His ability to embody both strength and compassion distinguished him from many rulers of his age, making him a figure admired across religious and cultural boundaries. The legacy of Salahuddin was also deeply tied to his ability to inspire unity. Before his rise, the Muslim world was fractured into rival states and dynasties that weakened themselves through infighting. Through a combination of patience, diplomacy, and military strength, he brought these disparate regions together under one cause: the defense and liberation of their lands from foreign invaders. His example showed that unity was not merely a political necessity, but also a spiritual one, a duty to protect what was sacred and to restore dignity to a people long divided. This message resonated not only in his own time, but also for generations. Afterward, Salahuddin came to symbolize the power of faith-driven leadership. His treatment of Jerusalem after its liberation in 1187 became one of the cornerstones of his legacy. While the Crusaders had bathed the city in blood when they captured it in 1099, Salahuddin's decision to spare lives, respect religious sites, and permit safe passage for Christian inhabitants established him as a leader of extraordinary moral character. This moment became legendary, and it shaped how he was remembered both in the Islamic world and beyond. Generations of Muslims saw him as the liberator of their holy city, while many Christians, even if they mourned their loss, acknowledged his justice and restraint. In the centuries that followed, Salahuddin's name continued to inspire leaders, scholars, and ordinary people alike. Muslim poets and historians praised him as a hero chosen by God to restore balance and justice. In the Western world, his story was retold as an example of honor in the midst of conflict. Even in modern times, his legacy is often invoked as a reminder of what principled leadership can achieve. He became a symbol not only of resistance against oppression, but also of the possibility of coexistence, demonstrating that even in war, respect and mercy could prevail over cruelty and vengeance. Salahuddin's personal character amplified his historical achievements. Known for his humility, he avoided the arrogance that often accompanied great rulers. He lived simply, prayed regularly, and constantly sought to align his actions with his faith. He was approachable to his people, and unlike many rulers who relied on fear to maintain power, he earned loyalty through justice and compassion. His leadership style created a bond of trust between him and those he governed, ensuring that his authority rested not only on military might, but also on moral credibility. The legacy of Salahuddin Ayyubi, therefore, was not confined to the territory he ruled or the victories he won. It lived on in the principles he embodied: unity, mercy, humility, and justice. His life demonstrated that greatness in leadership was measured not solely by conquest, but by the ability to inspire respect and admiration across cultures and faiths, leaving an enduring mark on history that would never be forgotten.